Howdy, welcome to the Smart Grid Center webinar titled Opportunities for Scalable Cyber-Physical Optimal Response in Power Systems. I'm Andrea Kishney from the Smart Grid Center of Texas A&M Engineering Experiment Station. Before introducing the speaker, let me ask you to send questions in the chat window anytime, or raise your hand with the hand button and I will allow you to unmute yourself and ask questions or share your comments after the talk. The presenter today is Dr. Kate Davis, Associate Professor at Electrical and Computer Engineering at Texas A&M University. Prior to joining A&M in 2017, Dr. Davis was a software engineer and senior consultant for PowerWorld Corporation, and she was a research scientist at University of Illinois Information Trust Institute. She got her PhD in electrical engineering, particularly in power and energy systems, from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign in 2011. For more than a decade, Dr. Davis has worked on and pioneered significant advancements to power system cyber-physical security by advancing modeling and analysis capabilities. Dr. Davis, take it away.
Thank you, Andrea. Well, howdy and welcome, everyone. And thank you all for participating. It's nice to be together today. So the purpose of this webinar is to reflect a little bit on a new project on scalable, optimal cyber-physical intrusion response. And we call this project SCORE for short, which stands for Scalable Cyber-Physical Optimal Response Engine. So here I'd like to frame SCORE in context of where we are and what we want to do next. So to do that, we'll start by taking a look at some techniques, methods, and lessons learned from previous efforts that feed into the SCORE project to discuss where we are now and how do we best go forward with these technologies. And then what are the major challenges and related opportunities, and what new and emerging efforts can help us address these. Okay, so the context is that it's all about grid resilience. So it's all about keeping the lights on in good times, but also in bad times. It's about riding through failure and delivering reliable, low-cost energy. So, well, what does that mean? So what is grid resilience? What kind of a problem is grid resilience? So let us frame a little bit what we're talking about here today. And that is, there are many aspects of grid resilience, and many words can actually fit into this blank space here. And so it also means that there are many challenges and opportunities to step in. And so a few examples: grid resilience is multi-stakeholder. It requires working together amongst and between a range of stakeholders on a range of scales, both architectural and time scales. And it's multi-time scale. You need to worry about everything from long-term planning to real-time fast operations, event lifecycle. You need to worry about the events that could happen. So how do we prepare for, endure, and respond to any given event? And how do we learn from those events to close the loop and plan the system better? And daily operations. So grid resilience isn't just something that you worry about when bad things happen. It's about the daily work and operations to keep the lights on. Good normal day-to-day operations is actually a proactive approach to resilience, which lessens the likelihood and impact of bad things happening. Resource coordination. So using available resources in the best way to ensure reliable and cost-effective delivery of power. And then multi-generational. So we have a big problem here with lots of roles to play, and we need a big next generation engineering workforce to step up to that. And coupled infrastructure. So how the electric grid is coupled to other infrastructures like natural gas and transportation and communications and even water. These couplings matter, especially under particular conditions. And then cyber physical. So it's not just about considering the electrical side, but also the communications, the computing, and the control systems that connect them and govern different aspects of the physical system operation. So in summary, grid resilience is a very multifaceted problem. It's actually all of these, and it's more. And so the question that I want you all to consider today is, where do you fit in? What role do you play? And that's because power system resilience requires everyone. And what I mean is that everyone is actually a stakeholder, whether they know it or not. The end users in the system are also stakeholders, which is kind of a unique situation. And so how do we help? How can we help this process? And how can we help this problem? And so our work on our new project is called SCORE, for Scalable Cyber Physical Optimal Response Engine. So this is what our work and the project SCORE are really about. And that is cyber physical power system security-oriented response for keeping the lights on. And so at the heart of this is the fact that electricity underlies the functionality of society, yet for the most part, most people take electricity for granted, at least until something goes wrong. And so really SCORE is about, how do we keep the lights on? How do we avoid bad things from happening, and assessing and avoiding those things? But how do we measure and quantify this avoidance? And that's an important question too, because it's a lot harder to quantify something that didn't happen. If something happens, you can add up what it costs, but we also need to be able to better quantify the value of an avoided event. And so the resilience of the grid is the motivation for this work. And in 2017, the National Academies issued a report on grid resilience that reveals concerns about how the grid remains vulnerable to natural disasters, physical and cyber attacks, and other accidental failures. And this report really does a fantastic job of developing the overview of the needs and comprehensive strategies that are needed to better prepare for and respond to events. And this resilience life cycle perspective that's shown in this figure is really crucial. And this is the key way of viewing resilience, is as a life cycle of an event, where you need to do something before an event to prepare the system better, during an event to withstand the normal operations, immediately after something happens to respond, and then a longer term recovery phase, and then observing and learning from what happened to plan the system better, so it closes the loop. And so this is a really essential part in how to achieve the goal. And the problem is that large scale power system operation and control is already complicated, and it just gets more complex and challenging when we really consider what all is going on behind the scenes from a cyber perspective. And part of the solution to addressing these challenges and in formulating strategies for how to respond is that we need to consider the grid as a cyber physical system, which it is, and avoid the tunnel vision of looking at parts of the system independently without regard for how the parts interact. And so to fill this gap, we need to build capabilities of our resources for operating through failure. And that is what we are all about, operating through failure across the life cycle of any of these events. And so in particular, I'll talk about that SCORE's focus is more on the part that's immediately right after an event, right when an event happens, and right after. It's kind of in that quick response part of this cycle here. And so SCORE solutions should be solutions of graceful degradation. That is, how do we selectively allow parts of the system to be removed from service while taking full advantage of the parts of the system that are still working. And so in SCORE, it's extending the protection system mentality, where we want to have surgical precision in how we respond at fine-grained levels, rather than just taking out the whole system, or rather than taking out more than we need to. And so how do we do this? So of course, to do this is an enormous challenge, and the solution is that we need to consider the system as a whole. And the need for resilient and secure grid monitoring and control does not just matter for the grid. The Department of Homeland Security named 16 critical infrastructure sectors where their asset systems and networks are so vital to the United States that their destruction or loss would devastate national security and welfare. And a key point here is they all depend on power and energy, and most, if not all, are also cyber physical systems. And so in other words, the key point here is that electricity is really crucial, and without power and energy, you can't do much. And so therefore, it's very important to understand our systems from a cyber physical perspective. And so to do this, we need to ask, well, what is a cyber physical system? And this is the definition from the National Science Foundation, which is they're engineered systems that are built from and depend upon the seamless integration of computational and physical components. And the reason this is important is that a better understanding of power systems as cyber physical systems informs us how to model, analyze, protect, and defend. And then we can see from the critical infrastructure discussion that it is key for the welfare of the entire nation. And so I'd like to ask people about this, which is to consider different threat categories. Okay, so you can categorize threats into some different categories. And so there's 3 shown here. And so within each of these categories, there are different vectors and different specific ways that someone or something could enact events or enact sequences of events and cause consequences. So you can group them into, for example, natural, like extreme weather, accidental, and intentional. And so the question here is, which categories are cyber relevant? And of course, everyone thinks of the intentional ones when you think of cyber incidents. But what is important here is that actually these are all cyber relevant. One that I like to talk about in particular as a good example is in this accidental category. So an example in this accidental category is data entry. So if you've ever looked at a power system model in detail and all the data involved, it's quite immense. There are many configurations and many model parameters. And so you can think about humans on a keyboard as a threat, actually. So it's so very easy to mistype a number and get a number that could be off by a factor of 10 that could go unnoticed. And this could affect the system, especially in a latent threat way, where everything may seem normal until there is some sort of perpetrating event. And then suddenly these little accidental errors and misconfigurations can have really bad consequences as well. So it's like the perfect storm. So I like to put a little context that actually all of these categories are cyber relevant. And we need to be even more concerned as cyber threats are evolving in sophistication and intruder knowledge. And this trend can be observed in numerous places, including from the actual power disturbance reports and many other places. And so the point is there really is an increasing need for defense, especially against advanced cyber physical threats. And so the question is, how can we help the good guys get ahead and stay ahead? And so in developing the tools and techniques to address this, there are some key challenges and requirements that need specific attention. So the solutions we develop, first they need to be scalable, and they need to be scalable because power systems are large-scale cyber-physical systems. And so we need solutions that are scalable both mathematically as well as practically. And solutions also need to be automatic as much as possible, which means that the more that we can automate the things that are error prone and that don't really need human involvement, the better. But this doesn't mean automating everything, and it doesn't mean taking the human out of the loop. It means automating solutions where we can, and then accounting for and working with the humans where we can as well. And then solutions also need to work for real world systems. And what this means in today's world and today's electric utility environment is, as much as possible, the solution should work with utilities today. We need to meet them where they are and meet them with the data sources and the software packages that they have and try to work with the real systems. And so there's this beautiful balance that we get to strike between getting to design something that's entirely new and then figuring out how to make those first principles from some design that's entirely new actually match up with and work with what is out there in the real world. And so that's what we get up to, what's what we get to do. And that's why I love waking up every morning and coming to work on this. And then the solution should also promote understanding or trust. So there are a lot of humans involved at different levels and in different roles: power systems operations, engineering, planning, security, analysts. And we need solutions and approaches that promote more openness of the algorithms so that the humans can understand these capabilities and limitations and trust them, and to actually be able to fully utilize these technologies and advance the research in the area. So it's about explainability and situational awareness. So to address this at Texas A&M, we've developed the Resilient Energy Systems Lab, or RES Lab testbed, which is a safe proving ground for designing and validating the cyber-physical control systems of the future. And so in summary, test beds are in general an important part of helping address these challenges. And then specifically, we have our test bed where we're doing this with large-scale synthetic electric grids augmented with synthetic cyber topology and substation architectures. At Texas A&M, we've had several projects and team members that have been and are involved in related work, and this is the group of some of our students up here. Our research is working to bridge the gaps in cyber physical models, approaches, and tools to defend against advanced threats that can target physical power system impact. And the defense of these threats does require utilizing cyber and physical data and models together, and this is our sweet spot. So within my group's cyber physical security work, we have the Cypress project, which is about designing a next generation cyber physical energy management system that is inherently cyber physical and considers security from the ground up. And today I'll be talking more about the new SCORE project, which builds upon Cypress. And so here is an overview architecture of our ResLab testbed, which is located out here at CIR, the Center for Infrastructure Renewal building on the RELIS campus. So it's about 20 minutes away from the main campus. And so Cypress communicates with PowerWorld Dynamic Studio and Core, which is the common open research emulator, and substation devices through different communication networks to mimic the real power system with utility control center, substation hardware devices. And SCORE is also being developed here on top of the Cypress EMS. So the objective of developing our next generation EMS capabilities in SCORE with the ResLab testbed is to achieve the full cyber physical EMS functionality of power system modeling, monitoring, visualization, intrusion detection, response, and control. Okay, so SCORE's research and development is being led through close partnership between academia and industry. So that was actually a major focus of this DOE call that SCORE is a part of, was enhancing long-term academic industry partnerships. And so a major highlight is our team, and we have long, extensive histories together. So there's Texas A&M, and we also have Georgia Tech, Oregon State University, George Washington University on the academic side. And then on the industry side, we have Network Perception, TDI Technologies, EPE, and PSC. And then we also have TEACS, the TEACS Cyber Readiness Center. And so SCORE is bringing together this strong academic industry team that's uniquely positioned to develop SCORE. And SCORE also builds on the transition of the team's prior successes in this area, including on Cypress and TDI's ConsoleWorks, CYPSA, MPView, and NRI. And so already I see our team and our plan, and we're working on together as a success story. And so in the tasks and the technical approach on this project, we want to leverage what each team member brings. And along with this team, it's also exciting to think about what the different technology transitions might look like, and might look several different ways because there are different stakeholders and vendors involved, and they can help us reach different customers and make different use cases, and each has its own unique set of needs. So a brief history of the problem is that today's state-of-the-art in cyber physical intrusion response faces some challenges and limitations that SCORE addresses. And so the first is that to achieve scalable cyber physical response, it requires an accurate and timely idea of the current state of the system, where the state here refers to the availability, status, and the values of the defining cyber and physical parameters throughout the system. And then it also requires awareness of the available and appropriate controls based on detailed and accurate knowledge of the system. And then from there, we need intrusion response actions and cyber and physical components that need to be coordinated through an algorithm that can prioritize, select, and actuate them. And then intrusion response so far also suffers from a lack of verification of the controls and accounting for the human in the loop. And then we also need to have a secure, trusted computing base of the system, managing the data collection, the automated decision-making algorithms, and the cyber physical intrusion response controls. And so our new project is called SCORE, and it's all about physics-aware, machine learning-based intrusion response, while explicitly considering humans who are also a key part of the control loop. And as I mentioned, SCORE is being designed to build upon Cypress's cyber physical next generation energy management system to help stakeholders answer the questions of what should we do next, how should we respond, what's the best use of coordinated available cyber physical controls, and then how do we do this in a timely manner at scale on a trustworthy platform. And so the goal of SCORE is to design such a response engine as an integral part of what a next generation energy management system should do. So to get an idea of how SCORE fits in, its purpose and context, it's useful to look at what I call the 3 pillars of power system cyber physical resilience. The key idea is that to achieve grid cyber physical resilience, it requires each of these 3 pillars to be strong and to support each other, kind of like a 3-legged stool. So SCORE will build upon our current Cypress project and prototype tool in ResLab, which gets us to the response ready phase. And then in SCORE, we focus on this 3rd pillar, which is response. So SCORE will calculate cyber physical intrusion response, leveraging, extending, and enhancing ResLab's cyber physical data fusion engine, building in new and better architectures for the AI techniques, and then using those in response. And so SCORE is bringing it together with Cypress and ResLab to develop a scalable cyber physical intrusion response engine. And this is the Cypress approach that SCORE is based on, which is about recognizing resilience as a cyber physical problem. And this is the overview of Cypress. I call it closing the loop. So Cypress is addressing how to do this in an effective, coordinated manner that begins very early before an event in the planning phase, and then carrying this model and the fused data through this entire pipeline. And so that's a little bit about Cypress and SCORE and how those fit together. Okay, so this is what I used to tell my students. So back before we got started in this research, I guess like over 6 years ago, when they would say this is hard, this is what I would tell them. So it's like this is the old way and this is the new way. So on the left side, there's like this windy road and people walking through this gate. And then on the right side here, there's like this guy with the axe, and there's like this big brick wall. But the point is that it's like, well, you know, if we can just knock down this wall, then the path will be straight. And so this is about what is easy to do versus what is important. And so it's like we know what we need to do, we just have to knock that wall down. And so the good news, though, is that really this wall has come down a lot in the past 6.5 years, more or less. And so that's good news. And then I used to joke that, well, I used to be a firefighter, so I know what to do with an axe. So I say, this is me standing over here with the axe saying, like, come on, guys, like, we just got to knock this wall down. Like, let's just pick up our axe and get it. And so lest you think I'm joking, I actually was a volunteer firefighter. And I think it's kind of like interesting to note that I think actually a firefighting type of approach is exactly what we need right now. And I'm being serious about that. I think that an emergency management and incident response approach to cyber incidents is more important now than ever. And so maybe there's a reason that part of how I got into this. So SCORE ultimately is about resilience enhancement by focusing on response. And so to see this, we can consider this visual that my former PhD student Hao Huang made. He defended his thesis, where we have these 3 categories of assessment, reinforcement, and response. And the SCORE project in particular is in this response category. But before we get to response, we have assessment. And assessment means to better identify and predict the threats. And then this reinforcement phase is about the design that improves the system's inherent ability of absorbing disturbances. So the response, which is where SCORE fits in, is how the system can deploy the resources to proactively defend the threats. And the infrastructural and operational resilience are interrelated, and having more resilience in the infrastructure lays the foundation for operational resilience. And so SCORE built on the Cypress EMS. So this is the Cypress EMS, and there's the paper and the full link to the paper about it there. And so Cypress is intended to serve as a proof of concept and prototype for the next generation energy management systems. And Cypress is also the launching pad for SCORE. So the SCORE project has 4 core technical focuses or tasks. And so there's 4 tasks, and there's also 2 cross-cutting themes that are really important across all the tasks. So there's physics-informed data fusion, device-level vulnerability and state assessment, fusion-based AI response engine, and trusted computing base. And then the 2 cross-cutting major themes that are emphasized heavily in a core component of each of these are the physics-aware machine learning for early response, and then scalability on the state and action space. And so in setting up SCORE, we need an exemplar system with some threats and some concrete actions to study. And we've been developing several of those that we're exploring. So we need the defense mechanisms as components of SCORE. So SCORE's actions and SCORE's inputs. Then the objective is to find and take the optimal actions against these kinds of threats in the network, where the optimal state must uphold the reliable delivery of energy. The optimal state should also mean that the cyber network is available and that it's not compromised, so its integrity. And moreover, on the physical side, we need to be considering that any given physical threat, which may be unrelated to cyber, in the unintentional or accidental categories that we talked about earlier, could also occur. And so what's the right model for that? Well, we think it's an MDP-like model, MDP Markov decision process-like model, using a cyber physical states-based notion where deep learning and reinforcement learning fills in what we don't know and helps the model scale. Another aspect is that we've done a lot of work on the design of reconfigurable network-based defense, which relates to and has been used in other projects and efforts as well. And this will be broadly applicable and will be developed more in SCORE. It's focused on being able to have secure operation of the non-compromised part of the grid, even when the compromised section is not secure. So that is, how do you reconfigure your resources to take advantage of the secure ones? And so we're considering that. And so SCORE addresses this question of the research question of can physics-aware cyber physical risk and deep learning-based techniques help us scalably assess the cyber physical power system to predict and mitigate the potential impacts on electric grid operation? And the answer is yes. And so putting it all together, this is the big picture where SCORE is focusing on this decision intelligence piece here and building on our Cypress EMS, where SCORE will calculate the cyber physical intrusion response, leveraging our data fusion engine and advancing and extending its combined cyber physical based detection and inference. And so in summary, this is the SCORE project approach and how to get there. A key crucial element in our approach is embedding physics into each element that's being researched for achieving this defense. And so even in the trusted computing-based research that's part of the SCORE project will be specifically physics aware. So the operational requirements of the physical system are being used in a research to help develop targeted controller software deep loading to reduce vulnerabilities and attack surface. And so I'll summarize some key fundamental parts of SCORE and its design. So the cornerstone of the approach is to understand your system. So to understand risk to resilience, you need to know everything about your system. And this is probably one of the most important parts. The more you know about your system, the better you can defend it. So modeling helps with this, and data helps with this. And I call it a map. So to find your way around something, it helps to have a map. And to defend a cyber physical system, it helps to have a map. So what does that map give us? That map gives us the union of the power system topology with the cyber network topology, and the intersection is a key part of the map. And then we can create and leverage new modeling techniques and tools to provide system visibility into what the threats are. So how far along a particular event or adversary might be, so that we can detect and defend against it at an early stage. And so understanding your system is really the core cyber physical security foundation. So on top of that, everything else can come. And it's also where I would say the devil's in the details. This is the part that always sounds the simplest, to just say, oh yeah, model your system really well, understand your system. But it's also the most important, and it's also the most challenging. And so our approach is all about risk. And so what is risk? So risk combines vulnerabilities and threats with impact, and risk is also the potential for loss, damage, or destruction of an asset as a result of the threat exploiting a vulnerability. It's based on the nature of the threat, the perceived vulnerabilities, and the impact of the threat or the harm. And risk includes, by definition, a quantification of impact. So broadly, this could be in terms of financial, privacy, reputation, legal, loss of life, things like that. For us, it's operational impact, which can be measured in some different ways in power systems. And in addition to impact, some key things that matter in risk assessment are the adversary, and this goes into the threat model. So the intent and the capability are two main elements of the threat model. For an adversary to really be a threat, it usually needs to have both intent and capability. So intent's the motivation or the will. This means having a target or a desire end state or having a doctrine. Capability, this is the resources. So that could be people, tools, and tactics. And the assets are what we're protecting. So for an asset, we need to know what are its adversaries and threats. And so the threats are what we're protecting against. And at the highest level, the adversary will use many resources, which may include electrical engineering knowledge, operator knowledge, may be willing to risk life, may be using insider help. It may involve physical elements and cyber elements, and it may disrupt or involve outside communications. And it is also useful to look at the history of attempts and successes. And so for offline risk, the key is that understanding your system means understanding the cyber physical links and how bad things can happen so that you can better understand and better protect against it. And it's important to not be naive and not to think that the adversary is unskilled and unmotivated. So here, the detailed modeling of physical, cyber, and cyber physical is crucial for understanding accurately and mitigating the risks related to the interdependencies of these systems. And one thing that can help an intelligent defender get ahead of an intelligent adversary is to think about, as a defender, what do I have or know that an adversary cannot have or know, and how can I use that to our advantage? And since the cyber world and security threats are vast, the way we make our problem, which is power grid defense, tractable, is that we prioritize what to worry about based on physical system function, which is safe grid operation. And fortunately, we have a good idea of what those metrics should be on the physical system side and a very good way of modeling the physical system side. And so our risk methods consider this explicitly, and then we use that to help identify and mitigate threats. But beyond understanding your system, the part two, or the core feature, is to fuse models and data to assess risk to resilience. So this is assessing this risk that I just talked about. And that's combining information from the cyber and control network side and the physical side to provide information to identify high-risk cyber attack-induced outages. And this provides cyber physical, situational awareness, and risk prioritization. And there are quite a few different approaches and techniques that we use to do this and that we can use to do this. The idea is to have a cyber physical state-space notion and cyber physical data fusion and algorithms that will be able to detect attacks early before they can cause impact, and to provide the situational awareness needed to quickly recommend and take good countermeasures. So this is a key part of what a next generation cyber physical energy management system should do. So model-based risk is at the core of our approach and our philosophy. So it's worth talking for a minute about what it is. The idea is that to respond, you need to be able to identify what's important so you can protect and defend with prioritization on the actions taken at the utility. So to find what's important, we have tools and techniques that I'll group into offline, cyber physical, system, risk, and online. So these find the worst access paths to cause physical impact given a starting point. And these paths reveal what are the most important devices to the system, and what are the paths to those devices. And from there, we have prioritization on what to defend. And toward expanding cyber physical system risk frameworks, we've come up with the scalable approach to feed into the analyses I just mentioned to help solve the problem of what I call aggregate exposure. So aggregate exposure identifies groups of devices that may be more exposed together due to cyber means than if we considered only physical, or than if we considered them only separately. And this makes the risk analyses that we have even more powerful. And we've applied the approach in a few different ways so far with good results. To show that intrusion and detection in the loop in our test bed, we implement some use cases that identify and target critical branches whose adverse actions can cause severe violations. And building on the example shown earlier, this figure shows what it might look like. This is an ARP spoofing where the adversary sends false ARP messages over a local network to effectively become a man in the middle. The adversary can receive packets from the master as an impersonator for the outstation and modify the commands and forward it to the outstation. And then in this way, the adversary can create different types of incidents, including false data injection, false command injection components that can be put together to achieve a broader target. And so our test bed allows us to analyze all the interesting timing details, which feeds into our data fusion and response algorithms. And so the objective from there is to merge the cyber and physical data to detect intrusions and reduce false positives. So data fusion, and we want to understand what the cyber physical state is. So the objective is to merge the cyber physical data and models to understand how the adversary is moving through the system and what's been compromised. And there are different methods and techniques we use on data fusion and intrusion detection. And we have different research looking at some different ones. And so a particular point I want to highlight is about inference. So in inferencing, the goal is to estimate the cyber physical state, where that is what is compromised and what are the actual paths that have been taken toward a target, leveraging knowledge in the model and the risk framework that we talked about earlier. And so the idea is making sense of what we would expect to see versus what we actually do see. And then moving from data fusion and data fusion-based machine learning for intrusion detection, we want to use the fused data to be able to infer the path of the adversary through the system. So we want to use our data fusion to help understand the adversary and its behavior better in the cyber physical system. And so we've been looking at some different techniques to do this. One of the highly successful ones is the Bayesian network-based. So Bayesian network-based methods seem pretty promising. We've also looked at Differ-Schaefer theory-based, and we have some papers and results on those. There's a couple at the bottom that show how this works and the potential of the methods to do this and bridge data fusion back to the models. And this is an area where I'm particularly interested in exploring further. And I think it's an important and emerging area. I think the importance really can't be overstated because it's very essential to map the offline static models with the online and dynamic data together to try to understand how the adversary would actually be moving. And so I think this is a very important piece. And then the third part, the goal is to have a cyber physical response recommendation engine in the cyber physical EMS. And this is SCORE that will build on the previous blocks to answer the question of what next. And so to achieve this, the solution we envision, and based on all the previous points, leverages MDPs or Markov decision processes. A key value proposition is the data-driven analytics, especially different techniques considering uncertainty that are combined with model-based risk analysis approaches, using model-based and also data-based early indicators of something going wrong. So we're looking for those early indicators. And this gives us inference of the adversary movement toward physical impact. And the ResLab test bed is also where we're experimenting and validating our approach. So part of the solution and why this works is that embedding physics into the detector is hard to defeat. And the reason for this is that an adversary cannot change the laws of physics. And so this also means that the cyber-physical fusion-based detection really can't be defeated. So if you can actually incorporate the laws of physics into your machine learning-based defense, then it's quite hard to defeat. So that's kind of that's the idea of the approaches that we're looking at in SCORE. And to understand how the defense works, it's important to go into the power system model side. And while the details of the model and the sensitivities are covered a lot in literature, I just want to point out 3 things on this. So the first is that the perturbations parallel with sensitivities, which are computable from the model and from the AC power flow equations. And the sensitivities give us a localized view of what happens around an operating point in a nonlinear system. So that is how a small change in one variable affects the variable somewhere else. And now these sensitivities, the exact same ones, are also available in the data, and they can be leveraged from the data. And this is like the key useful thing. And this fact can be considered well known, at least I would say this is a well-known but underutilized fact. And so the key is to basically take full advantage of this fact in our detectors. And so based on this, there's a lot of some results on developing good detectors. And this relates to a recently ended NSF project called Defenda, which I gave a webinar about Defenda when it ended. And from Defenda, we carry into the SCORE project some key principles on how to do this physics-informed machine learning for very good detection. And so 2 of those approaches are an autoencoder-based defense mechanism and a graph neural network-based defense mechanism. And so both of these key approaches apply the idea to embed the usage of the system's physics to thwart cyber attacks and even very stealthy ones. And so these 2 approaches are very strong defenses. We want to capture and extend these capabilities in SCORE's response and what we're working on. And so this is one of them. This is an autoencoder-based defense mechanism. This one's called A3D, which is later extended. This was like the first one. And it essentially learns and then predicts and projects the distribution of normal operating conditions. And so this is a type of neural network that learns a representation of a data distribution to compress and then reconstruct it, which helps filter out noise or what looks like noise at the latent state level, which actually includes even very stealthy false state injection attacks. And then also the other approach is based on GNNs or graph neural networks and graph signal processing. And so why do we want to use GNN or graph information in our machine learning? And that's because the power system lies in the non-Euclidean space. And in order to efficiently model the spatial correlations, graph type approaches that consider the topology of the underlying systems and the electrical information, such as using graph signal processing and graph neural networks and graph embedding, are necessary. And in fact, I think a key point is that power systems really require these type of graph type architectures as a very good way to exploit the spatial correlations of the grid. And so graph neural networks use graph signal processing. One of my PhD students, Osman, did his whole PhD thesis on graph neural networks, and this gives us the foundation for these detectors. And then from this foundation, you can develop different specific detector architectures. And so the information about the power system is embedded in this information that feeds into it. So the buses are represented by the vertices V, and the branches and transformers are represented by the edges E, and the line admittances are in the matrix W. And so some of the benefits are that this is a scalable and real-time detection and localization mechanism that fuses graph topology of the power grid with spatially correlated measurement data. And so it really has a lot of promise. And so this is one of our key approaches and methods we're bringing forward into SCORE. And so what's next on this is more comprehensive modeling and incorporation of the role of the cyber side with these techniques for defense and response. So most of the previous work in this area was only on the physical side. And then also in SCORE, we're aware of the need to consider and expose the hidden dangers and risks of automation and machine learning. And so going hand in hand with the automation we want to achieve, we need to, and we will be looking at the integrity of the data flow pipeline, which includes the risks that are embedded in the machine learning algorithms and their implementations as well. And so for machine learning approaches, we need to know if and when, we need to know that there can be no harm. We need to know why. We need to have evidence. And so this is just an example, a visual of using a method called the TS&E algorithm to compare and look at the different layers of these machine learning models that can be useful for understanding and verifying that they've achieved the right decisions. So SCORE is being developed in an agile process that's also very modular, which allows different functionalities of SCORE to be tested and run in isolated environments. So that's how we're developing it, is using this customer-centric agile cycle. And then an ongoing work is developing the cyber physical response framework and the use cases. So we're working on developing cyber physical the response engine based on industry input, and working on both the mathematical framework for response as well as its alignment and validation in the working testbed environment in ResLab, and then developing and synthesizing response use cases and mapping the impacts, agents, and action space to different size systems of larger sizes. So another key takeaway is that a key part of achieving long-term sustainable success on this problem is really collaborations and partnership within and for the energy sector. So creating cyber physical grid resilience requires not just a new approach technically, but also requires a significant paradigm shift on the people side, because not only do we need data from different parts of an organization, but we also need for these groups to understand more about each other and the importance of their respective roles. And so that's all part of what we're doing and what we're hoping to achieve through this research. And so this is a kind of a summary of the Cypress closing the loop model. And so SCORE built upon Cypress, and the idea is to consider the system from a data flow perspective, all the way from the measurement devices out in the field to the monitoring and the control systems in the control center, and then all the way out to close the loop and provide control, and have the same underlying cyber physical model and state notion throughout that whole loop. Okay, my final point, then we'll open it up to questions. So my final point is that to achieve power system cyber physical resilience, it requires all of those three aspects to be strong. And it also involves everyone and getting the right people involved in the right ways. And so getting the right people involved is actually part of the response. So the response is not just on the technical side, it's on the people side as well. And so this is also the education, the outreach. And so the good news is the next generation really gets it, and we just need to help arm them with a few things. And this is the key to actually solving the overall problem. And bringing it all together with Cypress and SCORE and ResLab and the cyber physical models and data together, we can help provide validation, detection capabilities, and early warning indicators, and mitigation information, and how to convey it to people and tools to help them do their jobs better. So cyber physical situational awareness and visualizations to different stakeholders. And then let's see, we have a lot of different upcoming plans and different things that I can talk about. I think I wanted to leave about 10 minutes at the end for any questions, and I can also mention some of those. It's really quick. So upcoming plan on I think it's on Tuesday. On Tuesday, NERC and Texas RE are putting on the Women's Leadership and Reliability and Security Conference, and you can check that out. And I will actually be on a panel on that on Tuesday. And then also there's another upcoming event at IEEE T&D in May. There's going to be a panel on cyber physical situational awareness and this energy management system approach. And so those are a couple things. And then if you look at these pictures on the slides, these are mostly from in May. We hosted a Energy and Power Research Day here at Texas A&M in our lab, and those are some of the photos from that. And we had the intrusion response roundtable and some demos, and we'll be looking to do the same thing again. I don't know the date for it yet, but you can be looking out for that, because we'll be doing something like that again. So with that, I think I will end there, and then we can see if there's any questions. And then there's also my contact information here, and be happy to talk to folks.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, for this great presentation. And for everyone, if you have a question, you may enter it to the Q&A window or raise your hand, and I allow you to unmute yourself and comment, question yourself. Please take this opportunity. Oh, there is a question. Great talk. Thanks. In your research project, do you consider building on top of existing standards used in the industry? If so,
yes,
we'd be glad to learn more.
Oh, great. Yes. So yeah, do we build on top of existing standards? So yes, and in fact, I think that's really a key focus of our project, maybe even more so than other. Our project is not just like a purely theoretical project. So we are definitely, like in our lab, we have real protocols running and emulation and real devices. And we very much are trying to be consistent with the standards in industry. And so, yes. And then, yeah.
The next question is, what specific kind of attackers do we consider in the SCORE project?
Okay, so in the SCORE project, we've been using what's called the MITRE attack framework. So if you look up the MITRE attack framework, it gives a really good kind of template for different multi-stage threat scenarios that are kind of distilled into the information that makes it useful for researchers like us to, pick different things in there to implement. So basically, we're using the MITRE attack framework, and we have some specific use cases. There's actually one. There's actually a paper on it. I don't know if I have it in the slides. We had a paper and a demo on it at SmartGridCon in 2023. And so I can point you to that paper. But actually, yeah, so developing these in emulation takes time. So the multi-stage use case that we presented or kind of showcased at SmartGridCon and had the demo on, it really took like a long time, like maybe a year, to fully develop it. And so this is actually one of the interesting things we've learned in doing this work. And like from the defense side, we want the point is to make the power system a hard target. So it's like good to find that it takes work to set them up. So yes, we use MITRE attack framework, and then there's a few specific ones, and then there's one in particular we've been focusing a lot on that's detailed in our recent SmartGridCon paper. And I don't know if we have the demo video on our website yet, but we do have a demo video, so I'll have to check if it's on our website and get it added. Okay, and then I can see NDR. Oh yeah, hey NDR. Let's see.
Another.
Oh yeah, modeling. Okay, I see there's a question that says, are you looking at modeling distribution systems? And yes. So I'm very interested in that. I don't have a project right now where that's actually a specific objective and focus. And I'm kind of looking for something. I'm looking to do something in that area. So yes, but so far the transmission side and actually generation to some extent as well has been more of a focus so far. Although there's also microgrids. There's two kind of microgrid use cases that we're working on too.
Dr. Davis mentioned the Energy and Power Research Day that was last year and showing the picture. Now the next one will be on the 23rd of April. So please mark your calendar, and we will send out more specific information for registration and agenda and things later. So please keep your radar on this research day coming.
Good. Are there any other questions? Let's see.
There is another question. Could you elaborate a little more on how variational autoencoder is used in the proposed tasks?
Oh, great question. Well, so we're still looking at that actually. So like the idea is that we kind of know what we want to use from the autoencoder and graph neural network approaches, but how specifically we're going to apply that in SCORE is something that we're still working on, I would say. What a key, yeah. And actually we did use, I guess in the smart grid com paper, we started, I mean, I guess maybe the short answer is we're still working on how we might actually use that in SCORE. And so my contact information's there, and I'll be like happy if anyone wants to reach out or discuss anything in more detail. So there'll be a lot of interesting points we can discuss.
Yes, this talk has been recorded and will be posted online. We will send out the information, the link to this presentation.
Oh, I forgot to
recording. If you want.
I forgot that I had a list of the papers. Some paper. Hang on. Oh, there we go. Okay, there's this. So there's this like little flow chart thing of some of the project tools and techniques. Since I don't know if the smart grid com paper that I was talking about is on here, but some of the other ones that are
there. And with that, I think we are up to the hour. So thank you so much, Dr. Davis, to present this fantastic cutting-edge presentation. And thanks to all of you attending and being interested in this research, and hope you will keep in touch. And we will send you information about the next webinar. Oh, there is one more question. Are you aware of any utilities adopting any cyber-physical mechanism into their EMS to address optional cyber attack risks?
Yes, I would say they really are. I mean, I think that's why I feel like that wall is like down now from where it was about 7 years ago. I mean, utilities are really moving ahead and trying to hit the ground running on implementing this. And so I definitely think that utilities are working hard on adopting this.
Thank you all, and keep in touch, and goodbye to everyone.
Thank you.